everyone, it's Demo Monday and I will have a quick lesson for you and then I'm going to get right into a demonstration. We're talking about paper this week and paper color. Now as you know, paper for pastels comes in so many different colors. Different brands have a variety of colors. Some are even crazy colors, like Canson comes in purple and fuchsia and really bright colors. Like, I think to myself, would I ever paint on those bright colors? But then we also come, excuse me, paper comes in more neutral tones, where the paper color is kind of in the grays and the browns. And actually, if I had a preference, I would pick those colors. In fact, this is Canson Moonstone. It's a kind of warm, medium, light gray, and it works well for just about anything you really want to paint. So if I'm picking a color paper, I tend to like to choose the neutral colors rather than the dark colors or the bright colors. But the question is, when would I ever use a colored piece of paper or toned piece of paper? And why? What difference does it make? And so that's what I want to talk about today. And then I'm going to do a demonstration on two different color papers so that we can compare and contrast the differences. So why does paper color matter? And it matters when we go to pick a piece of paper for a painting. A lot of times I hear artists say, oh, well, I just picked this color because it was on the top of my pile. Or I picked this color because I have so much of this red paper I want to use it up. You really want to pick a paper color that's going to help your painting. And how does paper color affect the painting? Well, there's two main things that I want to talk about. The first is this big word, simultaneous contrast. Sounds very complicated, and I think for several years it seemed too complicated for me. In fact, it went right over my head. But it's actually quite a simple concept or idea, and we're going to get into it in another post. It really deserves its own unit of study. But basically what it means is that everything is relative. Everything takes on its appearance by what surrounds it. And I'm going to give you an example. If I were to say I wanted to have a dark color on my paper, and I had a light color paper and I put a dark color down, that dark is going to look dark. But if I put that same dark on a darker piece of paper, all of a sudden that dark pastel wouldn't look as dark. It's all relative. That's what simultaneous contrast is. So what does that mean with our paper? And like I say, that's like the very, very quick version of it. But we will get into it in more detail. But what does it mean for us when we're choosing paper color? The color we choose has an effect on the pastel, how the pastel looks. So if we have a dark color paper or a bright color paper or a dull color paper, the color, when we put pastels on them, they take on a different look depending on the paper. So it matters. How do we know how it affects it? Well, trial and error, experience. There's no chart to say, oh, if I have red paper, it's going to be this, you know. Later on in the week, I'm going to give you a kind of a quick guide to paper, but just know that paper matters because of the way pastel looks on various different color papers. The second thing is color harmony. Choosing the paper color has an effect on the overall look of the painting, because bits and pieces of that paper color will tend to peek through the pastel. And think of those little pieces as yarn. And those yarn are kind of woven throughout the painting. And wherever you see it, it pokes through. It provides overall color harmony. I want to share this painting that I finished already. It's been done on an orange tone paper. So the paper itself, let me peel a little bit off so you can see. That's the color. It's Canson unsanded paper. It's kind of an orangey paper. Now, where the little bits and pieces of orange peek through, there's a little bit here, there's some in the sky, there's some right here on the edges. This is kind of like yarn, and it's woven throughout the painting, and it pulls the painting together. So that color is a unifier. It makes everything have color harmony. It pulls it all together. Now, if this color And it works because orange is complement to the greens in here, some of the greens that are used in here, so it kind of vibrates and the orange looks like dirt. So on all levels it works behind the green. If I had worked on, say, white paper, imagine all these little white bits peeking through, it would be a distraction. It'd be too many light pieces and you'd feel like you want to cover them up. So paper color matters because when it peeks through, it has that power to either help the painting or maybe even hinder the painting. Now what if you have a very, very heavy touch, and like you apply the pastel and you just put it on and you never see the paper because you cover the entire paper and you have a very heavy touch, then paper color doesn't matter as much. But if you like to have delicate layers of pastel where you're leaving some of the paper showing, then the color definitely matters. Alright, so there's just a couple of thoughts for you. The idea of simultaneous contrast, color harmony, leaving some of the paper showing, and how it affects the overall mood of the painting is something you want to consider when you paint. So here's what I want to do for today's demo. I have already painted one version of the scene. It's just some wildflowers against a mountain backdrop. And as I said, this is on orange paper. But I'm going to take the same exact pastels that I used for this painting, but this time I'm going to paint on a piece of blue paper. So it's blue, like this kind of a light grayed down blue. And I want to compare and contrast the difference between this version and this version because I'm going to use the same pastels. This is my reference photo and I've taken an index card and just covered up. I only wanted to paint a small portion of that photo. Alright, I've also already done the block in just to get a head start. So basically all I did is I blocked in the dark areas, which is the area underneath all the flowers. I blocked in the light area, which is the sky. I gave a cool blue to the distant mountain, and then I blocked in some of the yellow flowers, and then I put in some of this orange to go underneath the greens. Now I didn't have to do it on this one because I already had orange paper. Now you can then I rubbed it all in with my pipe insulation. You can already see that the blue of the paper is still peeking through. And I'm going to use hopefully a light enough touch that will still have some of that paper showing. So I'm going to go in now with the softer pastels and reinforce those dark areas. I'm just going to go in with a dark blue to begin with, reinforce the dark areas. I want another layer of dark, so I'm going to use a dark burgundy this time, reinforce the dark areas. I like to put some dark, a nice dark shape whenever I have a landscape with wildflowers or grass because it helps hold those things in place. That's a dark green, a cool green, and now one more layer of dark. I'm going to use a dark warm green. This green has a little more yellow to it. So there we have all of the darks blocked in. So the next thing that I'm going to do is, I usually address the sky next, but I want to put in the mountain colors first and then the sky because then I'll know how far to pull down the sky. So the mountain shape is in the distance, and I'm just going to put in a dark middle value grayed down blue, and I have a lighter version of that just to give a little definition to the mountain. Now this mountain happens to be in the distance, so it doesn't have to be a lot of detail. This is the darker blue just to put in some of those ridges that I see in this mountain. And there's a little bit, it looks like there's a little bit of snow, or maybe this is some of the rock on there, so I'm going to use the pale peach just to kind of hint at some of those rocks. And that's really all I'm going to do with the mountain shape, because again, I'm going to pull the flowers on top of it. This is in the distance. It can be fuzzy, out of focus. So now I'm going to do the sky, and I'm going to just layer a few different values of blue, making it warmer as I go down closer to the mountains. So this is more of a pale blue-green. And then I'm going to use a pale yellow right at the horizon. Now you can still see the blue tone of the paper. If I wanted a smoother sky and not to show the background or the paper color, I can take my finger and very, very lightly flit it across the sky, just softening and getting rid of the paper color. But then I'm always going to go back with some fresh pastel just to give it a little bit more vibrancy. I'm going to go back with that pale yellow and put some of that up at the horizon. Kind of hints at that being a little bit of a cloud shape. I'm going to take my finger and then just soften the edge. Again, I want some soft edges at that mountain shape to make it recede, make it go into the distance. Alright, so we've got the sky done, the mountain shape done. Now let's work a little bit more on the field with the flowers. And so what I want to do is I want to place the flowers, and I'm going to start with the duller yellow ochre. And I'm placing these flowers in it. I'm not copying the way they are so much on the photo as trying to arrange them so that they form an interesting kind of movement throughout the painting. And I think I need to have another one right up in that area. Put one off to the edge. Some of these are going to get covered up by the foliage, but I have to put them in first. I'm going to use a yellow-green. I'm reserving the brightest the brightest yellows for the flowers until the end. I'm going to build up this painting a little bit more, and then I'll kind of put the details on the flowers last. Alright, so before I go any further with the grasses, I'm going to take my fixative, and like I say, I use the Blair Low Odor. You can use any fixative as you want. If you want to use fixative, you don't have to use fixative. I like it because I like the texture it gives, but it's not really necessary. Now, when I darkened it with the fixative, you can really see the blue of the paper peeking through. See how it's making a difference in how the colors look versus how they look over on the orange paper. Alright, so we're going to let that dry just a bit, and we're going to come in, and I'm going to come in with some peach and bring some of that peachy color. I have a couple of versions of that peachy color. And I'm putting this in so that my grass, which is going to be green, has a little bit more interest underneath it. Alright, so now I'm going to come in and put the grass. I'm going to start at the back, and I'm going to use the cooler, lighter, duller greens. So I'm using my set of Terry Ludwig pastels, and I specifically selected a variety of greens from warm, dark, light, medium. I've got quite a variety. Now I'm using a darker green in this middle section. I'm also going to take the darker green while I have it in my hand and just put a little bit of that dark underneath some of those flowers. And you'll see where that comes in handy. I'm going to keep going with my greens. And then now I think it's time to add more to our yellow, just our yellow flowers, because they're starting to get lost. So I want to pull them back out. And that's a yellow-green, but they're really pretty bright. So I'm going to go, let's go with the yellow-orange first. Add some of that, yellow-orange. In some of these areas, I'm pressing down pretty hard and you're not really noticing the paper color underneath. But in some of the other areas, I'm leaving a lighter touch, and then you can definitely see the blue of the paper. Now let's go on top of that with the lemony yellow. It's the cooler yellow. There goes Heidi. There's a cat that's been hanging out taunting Heidi at the window. And it sits there and it stares at her. And he's very brazen. Alright, so now we've got the flowers. It's time to continue with our greens. So I'm going to go ahead with this, I like to call this the grassy green. It's a coolish green. And then I have a little bit of a lighter version. Whoa! Didn't break. Notice I haven't had any, right now I have not introduced any details as far as stems and grasses, because what I like to do is first set up all of the big simple shapes, and then I'll come in with the final details. So we're getting to that point. I'm going to give it another quick spray. It's harder to spray nicely when it's a new can for some reason. And I like, we're going to start to see some texture now that I'm going to go over this layer and go with the lighter. There we go. Get some of that fun texture. And let's put in a warmer, more yellowy green where we've got. Alright, all of the big simple shapes are in place. I'm going to pull out the box of hard pastels that I use. I sometimes refer to this as the grass box because it's full of the colors that I like to use to paint grasses. And I'm looking for a dark green and I don't see it, so I'm going to use the thicker pastel. And I'm going to come in and put a few of those stems. And maybe darken some of the areas right in here. The other thing that I liked about this particular scene is how it has some of the grasses going up over the mountain, because we have that, the point of view is like we're low and we're looking up. So I really want to pull some of the grasses up, not only just to hide some of the flowers, but also to reinforce that low point of view. Alright, I think I can go in and before I go too much further, and redo some of the yellow flowers that are getting lost in the grass before I go much further. And I think we need one other little guy right over there, and then we can continue with creating our grass marks with the harder pastels. Now, normally when I'm doing this and I'm not doing it for a demo, I'll take my time with these grass marks. I'll make a few marks, I'll step back and evaluate them because I don't want to put too many. And it's really easy when you're not paying attention to get caught up and putting in, oh, you know, if one looks good, how would, you know, 3 more look? So it's really important if you're going to be doing the grasses that you take time to step back and evaluate where you're going with it. I'm going to use some of these yellow grasses. And then the final thing that I'm going to add to this is bring down some of that blue that's in the sky and that's in the background or the paper color, and add just little bits and pieces of blue, like they could be blue flowers sprinkled in there. Alright, so that's done enough. I might spend more time on it if I wasn't doing this on a video, but I really want to share with you the contrast between working on the cool blue paper versus the warm orangey paper. And I personally feel that this feels like a little bit more of a moody, overcast day, where this definitely feels sunnier. I had a hard time getting these flowers to look as bright as these flowers. And it wasn't the result of the pastels, the same pastels, the same type of paper. So I have to believe that it is related to that cooler tone of the blue in the paper. And you can still see in bits and pieces where it's peeking through, the same as I did for the orange. So paper color does matter. There's a difference. It's a subtle difference. I grant you it's very subtle, But it is a difference, and it is something that we want to keep in mind when we're starting a painting, is to think about the color and how your painting will look on that color. And I'll give a lot more information on this in the coming days, so I hope you've enjoyed this demo, and let's paint.